Many years ago, after the eruption of the Mount Pinatubo, I had an unforgettable conversation with an old farmer in an evacuation center somewhere in Pampanga. The man narrated to me how he had lost everything after a heavy rain had triggered a mud flow that buried the whole barangay, including his rice field, livestock, his house, and all his farm implements under almost 30 feet of lahar. That's what they call the mud flows. After a long conversation, a brother priest from the seminary approached me, and he said that the bus was ready for our departure, so I said goodbye to the old man. He was pleasantly surprised to find out that I was a priest because I didn't tell him. Before we parted ways, he drew out a 20 peso bill from his pocket. He took my hand and kissed it and put a 20 peso bill in the palm of my hand. Of course, I was surprised. "What is the money for?" I asked him. He had a faint smile on his face and he said, "How blessed I am to have talked to a priest. Would you please say a Thanksgiving Mass for me, Father?" I took his hand and pressed it on my forehead so I could also receive his blessing. And then I put back the 20 pesos into the palm of his hand. And I said to him, "Yes, I would gladly include you in my Mass intentions, but there is no need for you to give me a stipend for it. You need this money more than I do," I said. "You said you wanted to offer a thanksgiving. Thanksgiving for what?" I asked, because he had just told me how Pinatubo had destroyed all his properties. You know what he said? He said, "Thanksgiving for life, Father." And he made it sound like it was so obvious. He said, "How blessed we are that we survived the disaster. I did not lose a single member of my family. Isn't that a blessing?" I was silent in the bus on our way back because his words continued to ring in my ears. Isn't that a blessing? I was both moved and I was still having mixed feelings about his declaration. Today's gospel is about blessings, about people who live a blessed life. We call them the Beatitudes. They are the introduction to Jesus' famous Sermon on the Mount discourse in Matthew chapters 5 to 7. Some of the lines are honestly hard to swallow, like, "Blessed are the sorrowful. Blessed are those who are insulted and persecuted and slandered." And my reaction is, really? The others are a little bit easier to take. But how do we take them as a whole package of wisdom from Jesus? You know, in the Hebrew language, the image of blessing is the ashur, meaning the sole of the foot, which, according to some biblical scholars, is the singular form of the plural asherim, which means wealth, fortunes, blessings. I have always found this strange, but they seem to find it perfectly logical. They say, your footsteps symbolize your life's direction. No wonder the prophet Isaiah has this line extolling the feet of the messenger of good news He says, "How beautiful on the mountain are the feet of the one who brings good news." And you know that in the New Testament, a foot in the basin has become an image of servant leadership for Christianity. Well, such is the Hebrew worldview. But I wonder why we Filipinos seem to operate differently. Our image for blessing is not the foot, but the hand. And specifically, the palm of the hand. Palad in Tagalog. Palad meaning the open hand. And we call a blessed man mapalad, open-handed. I used to joke about this because the beggars with open hands who are seated in front of the Quiapo church do not seem to project an image of good luck or good fortune. But that is how it seems to go with our Filipino mindset. We open our hands to give, but we must also be ready to open our hands to receive if we wish to live a blessed life. Sometimes we have to have the humility to admit that we are in need if we want to get by in a situation of want or adversity. People who are too proud will find it hard to receive a blessing. We open our hands to welcome people, but we also wave goodbye to them with open hands. The parting is as much a blessing as the welcoming. We open our hands to offer an embrace or a pat on someone's back. But the open hand can sometimes also come as a slap on your face. We open our hands to lift them in the air to express surrender. Or we stretch them as an offer of reconciliation. We refer to generous people as open-handed. For us, it means they do not keep the blessing only to themselves. It merely flows through their hands. I therefore suggest that maybe the Filipino worldview captures well what Jesus is saying in these Beatitudes. Blessing is an attitude. Well, a positive attitude, of course. Or better yet, blessing is a disposition. Matthew describes it as poverty of spirit, humility, readiness for obedience, lowliness, never haughtiness. And why is grieving also a blessing? Well, because only those who have loved can grieve. Blessing is a disposition of openness to grace. How can a bucket be filled with water if it is closed or full of trash? Blessing is also the capacity to be moved by the sufferings of others. It is the refusal to be mastered by hatred or anger or resentments. It is the stubborn choice for the path of peace and non-violence. It is the readiness to participate in the redemptive suffering and death of Him who desires the salvation even of the sinners and the undeserving. It is the choice not to wait for the hereafter to experience heaven, but to start it already in the here and now. As Jesus would say, to live life on earth as it is in heaven. Well, I started with a story, and now I would like to end with a story. I remember a father and a mother asking me to bless their child who had Down syndrome. The boy was giggling all the time. And the father said, "You know, Father, this boy is our blessing." I have heard that from many parents. I wonder if other parents would agree, I thought to myself. But they do claim that their fortunes grew after they welcomed this boy into their lives. I do not take that to be a superstitious claim. You welcome a child with disability as a blessing. You learn to be more patient, more understanding, more kind, more hardworking. You learn to anticipate his needs. You shield him from bullies. And you try to be lavish in your affection. You double your time in your effort to give him a good future. You do the impossible to give him a meaningful life. Isn't that indeed a blessing? So, why would you be surprised that his fortunes had multiplied? How blessed indeed they are.